Okay. How you guys doing?
Good.
Nice to meet all of you. Um, you came at a good time. We're just getting started. Cool. Okay, so my name is David. I grew up in Marlborough, New Jersey. I grew up in a secular family. My mother is the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and my father grew up in the Bronx. I didn't know what tefillin was growing up. I didn't know what Shabbat was growing up. I never heard of these things. I never heard of the word Hashem. Um, God was never spoken about in my house. But I was always kind of like a deeper soul. So I was always thinking about things. I have a theory. I don't know if it's true. My wife makes fun of my theories. But I think that Jews in general believe. And if they don't, it's probably for a good reason, but something happened. Maybe it's not in the context of Judaism or they haven't heard of that context, but it's almost like, the Gemara, the oral Torah says that Jews are believers and children of believers. For me, that you're going to see as my story goes, I become a very hardcore atheist. And even there, I still believed. I was just really angry. So, um, so I always kind of assumed that there was. And I had a time in my life when I was in elementary school towards the end where I had a group of friends. They were like considered like the cool kids, but I never felt cool. And I never felt like I fit in with them. I kind of always felt like an alien. But I thought like if I hung out with them enough, maybe I would also be cool. I don't know. Or at least I would feel like them, but I never really did. And I didn't really enjoy hanging out with them that much. But there's like this thing called insecurity. And so I was like extremely insecure. And I figured there must be something wrong with me. And I felt different. And then eventually one day I found out that I actually was different because I came to my school, probably like fifth grade, sixth grade, and it was recess. I came outside, and I see all my group of friends like all the way in the back of the field. So I assumed, okay, they're all hanging out over there. I'll go over there. But when I went over there, they all ran somewhere else. I was also very naive, like growing up in a lot of ways socially. I guess I probably still am. And so I kept chasing after them, not realizing that they were running away from me. And then finally, I don't know if I registered it consciously, but I knew something was wrong. And I walked back into the school like really defeated, what Rabbi Nachman would call biyeush. I felt like really in despair and confused. And I sat down, and then someone came up next to me and told me, just so you know, David, they're all running away from you. Apparently, I was saying things, doing things, aka being myself, and that was extremely like threatening to them, something that they didn't enjoy, and I guess at some point was something they didn't want a part of our circle anymore. And so that was like a moment for me that I had to rethink life. I had to rethink society. I had to rethink social things. Sometimes dark things happen in your life, and before those things happen, you don't even realize that there's dark things. But then once you realize that there is a dark thing, then you start seeing a lot of dark things. And that's what happened to me. I used to watch this law show. It's called The Practice. They don't have it anymore. Maybe you heard of Law and Order. Do they have that anymore? Yeah. Okay. So the show The Practice, there was a bad guy who he was on trial for murdering a lot of people. And throughout the entire show, you have the defense attorney who's fighting for him to get him off because he's falsely accused, or so you think the whole episode. And at the very end of the episode, he finally gets him off. And I saw this right after this episode happened, probably that night. And maybe I like saw myself in this whole thing, like maybe I'm that guy, I'm being falsely accused and, whatever, associating myself with this whole experience. But then he says to the lawyer at the end of the show, right before it ends, "Thank you so much for getting me off. Just so you know, I really did kill all of those people. And I'm going to keep killing more people thanks to you." And then the show ended. Now, if that thing didn't happen that morning, I don't think I would have been disturbed. But between the morning and that, I had like a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, do I not understand like at all what's going on in this world? Is there like real darkness, And I stopped being able to sleep. So I couldn't sleep at night. That's when I saw my first social worker at school. And soon after that, I saw my first therapist. I was about 10 years old. Eventually, they diagnosed me with not like full-on depression, but they called it, it's like a mild depressive episode. If it was back in my social work days, I would remember what this thing is called. That depression, as the years went on, started to become more intense. The episodes became more frequent, and the debilitating nature of it increased. I stopped hanging out with those kids. I made new friends. I had to like reinvent myself. But I was never the same after that. I didn't trust anybody after that. I didn't feel safe anymore. And I just saw so many things missing in the world. I saw a lot of poverty. I saw a lot of illness. It was always there. But now I saw it. And when I was in middle school, I used to read a lot. So I saw this book. I picked it up and had a picture of a person and a monkey on it. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So I picked it up, and it's called Evolutionary Psychology. So I didn't know what it was. I opened it up. And it starts to explain about how people are really evolved monkeys. And how, because of that, we do the same things that animals do. There's social groups. The biggest monkey is getting with the hottest girl, you know what I mean? And, the whole shebang. And you guys, I guess a lot of you grew up secular, are secular, whatever it might be. So for me, this was like a coming to God moment. I had such an aha moment from this because I was searching now for answers of how could the world be so cruel. And this gave me a context for everything. Oh, I'm the one that's weird. That's normal. This is what people do because this is what monkeys do, and we're just evolved monkeys. I didn't have an answer of why I'm not like that. I mean, I am like a monkey, but like not like in those ways. And so the moment that I registered this and felt like it answered all my questions, I became like a full-fledged atheist. I started reading like all of the books. I started listening to all of they didn't have podcasts back then, but like whatever I could find. And I started to feel like literally the greatest ill in the world is religion. I started reading the history of it. All the wars were caused by religion, and whatever. I went into a whole phase like this. I became what's called like a religious atheist. By the time I got to high school, I was already now smoking pot, but I was the first one in my school to smoke pot. Now it's like, I think it's like going like McDonald's and getting a burger. It's not even a big deal anymore, right? Like getting pot is like just like crayons. But back when I was a kid, it was really stigmatized. You know what I mean? Like my brother had to sneak it to me. It was way too early. I was literally like in elementary school. And I became like the biggest pothead in my school. I was probably the first one to sell it. My new friends were like the potheads. I used to wear like multicolored shirts every day. I really leaned in, you know what I mean? Listened to Led Zeppelin when I got home and like, went through the whole thing. Started going to Dave Matthews Band concerts all the time, traveling across the world to see them. And then I went to college, and I went to Penn State University. So I said, we're going to have to, yeah, that's okay. He's like, it's just a shirt, I don't know. And when I got there, so it's called Happy Valley. So just so you know, the reason why it's called Happy Valley is because you have people for 18 years that all lived under their parents' house that were never able to do anything. Then take 100,000 of them and put them in a completely isolated area in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania where there is no oversight, not police, no nothing. Number one party school in the world for a reason at the time. In fact, like the first day that you got there, you usually always heard about the first day of the year someone died, like that first night. Someone fell off a roof, like crazy stuff. Now thinking about it, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine those parents. But at the time, you're just like, this is awesome, man. This school's crazy. So anyway, when I was there, one of the things that happens when you don't believe in something more, or that your life is meaningful, and you're also like a deep soul, you have to fill in the hole somehow. And so for me, marijuana eventually wasn't enough. And so by the time I was at Penn State, they were drinking, at night. Now, most people were just drinking to get tipsy. Some people were drinking a little bit more than that. But because I have this very big hole, I'm downing like bottles. And I was getting blacked out drunk like almost every night. Sometimes I would wake up like in a totally different place than I started, didn't know how I got there. Somehow hoping that one day that would end up, getting me to the place I needed to go to in my life. I didn't really think it all through, but I didn't care because it was filling me up the night. And I also started working out like a fiend because if we're like monkeys, and then I just need to get in better shape and start, like the Italians do in my state, gym, tan, and laundry. I don't know if you know. I was like, I got to get on the program with them because they know what they're doing. Like it's working. So I got rid of my glasses. I wore contacts. I started working out like crazy. And that also became like a drug for me. I know most people say working out is always good, but the truth is not anything is always good. We're going to speak about him a little bit later, but Rabbi Nachman says that the Yetzer Hara, which means the negative part that is confronting you on a daily basis, he encloses himself in a mitzvah, which means he's always enclosing himself in a positive move for you in your life, or in a positive experience for you in your life. And it's hurting you, and you don't even realize it's hurting you because it's enclosed in a good thing. In this case, working out just became another type of drug for me. And finally, for the first time in my life, girls liked me. So that was very exciting. But on the other hand, this kind of goes to, I guess, the paradox of my life. I'm not really that person. I'm like a very soft, almost like Winnie the Pooh, and now I'm acting like a beefhead, in my fraternity, like chest pumping guys, and what am I doing? This is the stupidest thing in the world. But these girls are watching these guys chest bump, so here we go. I'm going for it. You know what I mean? And literally, you're at frat parties and you're sweating your tuchus off, and the last place you'd ever want to be, it's almost like if they wanted to torture a terrorist, you could put them in those Penn State fraternities on the bottom floor. 1,000 people right on top of each other, nowhere to move, sweating. It was disgusting. And then you just did it again, and you did it again, and you did it again, and you just one day I'm gonna get to the right frat house, it's gonna be geschmack, it's gonna be awesome. It never is. Anyway, since the hole is not getting filled, the hole gets bigger. And so the drugs got more intense. It went from alcohol to mushrooms, and then it went from mushrooms to cocaine. At some point, I was doing cocaine all the time, to the point that, I'll tell you a good story. I was going to a Dave Matthews Band concert in Virginia, and I went with my best friend. So we drove down there. So if you guys don't know Dave Matthews Band, they're from Charlottesville, Virginia. This is not a plug to go listen to them or anything, but just to give you a context, it's like if you're Jewish going to Jerusalem, if you're into that thing. You know what I mean? So it's for us to go to Charlottesville, Virginia was we're going to the Mecca. You know what I mean? This is it. We went down there. It was a 2-night concert. First night, amazing. We blazed. We went back to the hotel. We slept there. That night, I couldn't sleep because I had a huge pain in my chest. And I thought, actually, I didn't know what I thought, but it was just a very heavy pain. I also have a very heavy pain tolerance, which sounds like it's only a good thing, but actually it can really hurt you because you don't get the help that you need, because you can bear so much pain. That's physically, that's emotionally. So I'm just laying there with this heavy pain on my chest. And instead of just waking my best friend up, telling him, listen, I think I need to go to the hospital or the doctor or something, I don't want to tell him something's wrong, because I don't tell people what's wrong, right? So I'm just laying there for hours, not able to sleep, with this heavy pain in my chest. Morning comes, the sunrise comes, so I must have been up for literally 8 hours lying there. Finally, I'm okay, I gotta go, but I still didn't tell my friend. I literally just got in a cab and hauled over to the UVA hospital, which apparently is one of the best hospitals in the country. When I got there, I waited for hours with the paperwork. Eventually, the doctor saw me, and she told me, you have gas. I was like, I don't know, I'm Jewish. I think I've had enough experiences with gas. It's not like this, it's like this really, I'm like in a lot of pain. He's like, no, it's a really serious case of gas. So I was like, okay, he's like, you usually use Pepto-Bismol, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, so this is called the Molotov cocktail, which is just like souped up Pepto-Bismol. It was white, it was very powerful apparently. They gave it to me and they said, you're good, go home. Like, okay. Took the Pepto-Bismol Molotov cocktail, went back. Now it's the second night of the concert, and I'm feeling that pain again. Morning comes, we're about to drive back, and I still haven't told my friend anything. Now we're in the car on the way back, and it's getting really intense. And I tell my friend, I'm like, Dave, listen, I have this pain in my chest. If it doesn't get better in the next few minutes, we might have to go to the hospital. And he's like, yeah, bro, whatever you need. And then like before he even finished speaking, I'm like, we got to go to the hospital. He drives me now to like this little tiny hole in the wall medical office. We go in there. They hook me up to an EKG. And then she sits me down and she goes, okay, listen, everything's fine. Don't worry about anything. You're having a heart attack. Don't worry. Everything is going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I didn't know at the time, but apparently they then took my best friend, asked him to speak to him privately outside the room. He didn't tell me for like a couple years because he was so traumatized from the experience. But they told him, your friend's probably not going to make it. You have to call his parents and let him know he's having a heart attack and he might not make it. And he did. He called my parents and apparently told them. I didn't know any of this. He said it was the worst moment of his life. They put me, they're like, okay, but don't worry, everything's great. We're going to send you to the best hospital in the country, UVA hospital. There's a helicopter coming right now. And don't worry about the pain. We're going to boost you with this thing called morphine. You're not going to feel anything. And you're going to get there and everything's going to be okay. I'm like, okay, great. We get in the helicopter. They give me the morphine. This is nice because I like drugs. And now I'm all of a sudden at the UVA hospital. And when I get there, this time it's totally different. Every doctor, every nurse, every faculty member is waiting for me at the hospital. Apparently, 23-year-olds, 22-year-olds don't usually have heart attacks, period. It's just very unusual. And the fact that I was just there and that doctor, didn't do the EKG and just, attributed to my Jewish whatever and told me I had gas, assumed I had chulin or something like that. When I got there, she was actually crying. This was kind of like a window into what would be my rabbinical career, because as soon as I got in there, they had me like on a stretcher and she was crying and she said to me, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And instead of like me telling her, like I really wish you would, I'm like, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. Ein shum yesh ba'olam klal. There's no such thing as despair in the world at all. And then she brought me to the side. Thank God. They did some more tests and they came back and told me, thank God you're not having a heart attack. You're having something called pericarditis, myocarditis, which means inflammation of the heart. From probably all the drugs that I did, then there was an infection in Penn State. Everything spreads like crazy over there quickly. Between the two, it affected my heart. And apparently, like the pain of that thing is the pain of a heart attack, which is why it was showing up on the EKG like that. But they said, you're going to be okay. So amazing. But the doctor said to me, do you do any drugs? And then I'm like sitting there, I'm like, I don't know. He goes, listen, this is totally between me and you. Nobody's going to know about this. He seemed like a really cool guy, nice guy. He goes, you do cocaine? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, how much? I said, a lot. He goes, listen, I'm going to have like a straight up, tell you something straight up right now. Like, I never did cocaine, the doctor said. Sounds like one hell of a time. But if you do it again, you're probably not going to be here anymore. So just know that, and I didn't want to die, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want my life to end, so I just was trying to fill the hole. And fast forward a little bit, I stopped doing cocaine after that, but I still was drinking, still was smoking, still with women, hoping somehow the hole's going to get filled. Now, we're between Penn State and graduate school. I went to Penn State for psychology. Just so you know, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a therapist, but the reason why most people get into psychology or social work is because they themselves have struggled. One of the things that suffering does to you is it makes you very compassionate for other people. And you need that if you want to have a job where you listen to, when you're with your family and like someone's complaining all the time, like the last thing you want to do is be with them. Now, raise your hand if you want a profession where you listen to that for 8 straight hours. Something had to happen to you, you know what I mean? So that was me. On the one hand, I really cared about people and I wanted to help people who were struggling. On the other hand, I probably was looking for an answer for myself along the way. Between Penn State and graduate school, my best friend said to me, Dave, we have a free trip to Israel if we want it. And, he knows me as the hardcore atheist, doesn't think I'm going to take him up on it. But I'm like, free trip to Israel? I don't know. Like, who would say no to a free trip to anywhere, I like having a good time. I traveled around Europe before. I studied in Spain. So I was like, cool, sign us up. Right before this, I should tell you, I was in Atlantic City. Who talked to me about Atlantic City here? Someone spoke to me. That was you. I said I had a good story about Atlantic City. So there was a festival there. It was like way too much dopamine for me, but they had 3 bands playing at the same exact time, which is like a person with ADD's worst nightmare. I went because of Dave Matthews Band. This is now like my 30th concert, I think, there. This time, though, something crazy happened. This guy walked around with these little like tablets with smiley faces on them. So he walked over to me, random kid, and said to me, do you want these? And I said, what is it? And then he told me, it's LSD, it's acid. So my friend knows I'm like the crazy guy who does everything. He's a little bit more caution. Not so much more, but a little bit more. And he said, what do you think? I was like, I have the hole, right? Maybe this will fill in the hole, so let's do it. He ended up having the best concert experience of his life. But I had a very spiritual awakening. I had they call it in the Torah, chazon, a vision. In the psychological world, they probably call it hallucination. But it was extremely spiritual, not just spiritual. When I eventually learned Torah, the whole thing was just like the Torah on acid. It was very messianic. There was this theme that was going throughout the entire thing, which I found out later on was actually a pasuk in the Torah. Pasuk is a verse. I hate these words because I grew up with Christianity, so all these words give me a negative. I try to keep it Hebrew, but obviously, it's hard because you got to say what it is. A line in the Torah. Okay, I don't know. Maybe you guys don't have this stigma I have, but I still can't.
I think they have a different association with red
Oh,
wine.
maybe a good one. Okay, there's a different. We exchange one line for another line. Okay, so it says Ma shehaya hu yiyeh. It means what that was, he will be, or it will be. What that was will be. Shlomo Melech is the wisest man who ever lived. King Solomon, King David's son. What that was will be. Basic understanding is everything goes in circles, right? Anything that has happened will happen again. That was the theme of this experience for me. Whatever was in the beginning of reality will take place again at the end of reality. I'm not going to get too much more into it because I don't want you guys to think I'm insane. But when I came out of that experience, I told my friend, you have to get us on this birthright trip. And he's like, okay. So he signed us up. And it was a totally secular birthright trip. I'm talking like the most secular you can find. But you still have to fill in how you're Jewish. I think back then it was a little bit more strict. I think now you just need your dad to be Jewish. It's much whatever. I told them, I wrote it out, and I guess they didn't feel like they were sure I was Jewish after what I wrote. So I didn't get on the trip. I guess I was that secular that I couldn't get on the secular birthright trip. And my friend probably thought, okay, that's it. David's going to let it go and we'll keep going to these concerts. He's going to go to graduate school. I'll do my thing and that's it. But I kept hawking him about going to Israel. Finally, he signs us back up again. This time we get on the trip. It's us, two 22-year-olds with a bunch of 18-year-olds, many of whom were Persian. This was my first time meeting Sephardim. Many of whom were traditional, which for me was like Hasidic. I never met somebody holding at that level of doing Kiddush on Friday, believing in God, even though you don't keep the mitzvahs. That was like repping tefillin for me, you know what I mean? And then there was actually a couple kids who were modern Orthodox. So that was the first time I ever saw anybody wrap tefillin. These kids were 18 years old. One's name was Ben, one's name was Brandon. If you guys ever see this, love you guys. I think one of them just got married. So anyway, this guy, Brandon, is putting tefillin on. Now at the time, imagine, I've never seen them, I've never heard of them. So all I see is a big, thick leather strapping rope that he is tightly squeezing around his arm, and then on his head. And I'm a psychologist, right? So I'm concerned. So I walked over, and I said, "You okay?" And he can't talk because he's in the middle of band. I was like, "Oh my gosh, something's wrong." So it's like, "You want to talk about it?" And then he looked at me. He was like, I was like, "What are you doing?" His friend's like, "Dude, he's rapping tefillin. What's your deal?" And I was like, "What's tefillin?" And then he tells me, Jewish people since the beginning of time, this whole thing. I was like, "Dave, you got us on a crazy religious trip. These kids are like fanatical." It happened to be, I didn't realize at the time that modern Orthodox Persian 18-year-olds really like hanging out with 22-year-old secular druggies. So we became very close on the trip. They liked hanging out with us because we were a lot of fun. We liked hanging out with them because here were these two 18-year-olds in a cult. And we really bonded. So we did the whole trip with them. Awesome. When I went to Israel, I did feel like I was home even though I'd never been there. When I came out of the plane, I didn't know anything about the air of the land of Israel. The Torah speaks a lot about the air of the land. But I came off the plane, I literally felt like I was home, which I never felt growing up. Again, I told you, I felt like a stranger my whole life. And I felt home. I didn't have any context for that because I'm an atheist, There's no reason that I should feel like that. Now, at the end of this trip, I was like, cool. I didn't get any answers to my vision, you know what I mean? I didn't, whatever. But I'm about to leave, and those two boys said to me, "David, you want to travel with us around Israel? We're going to stay for a month. There's a wedding at the Kotel, the Western Wall, at the end of the month, but we're here until then." So I called my dad. I didn't know what to do. He said, "David, you're starting graduate school. You're not going to have time. You're not going to have money. You're not going to do these things that you've been doing. You're about to start real life. See how much it is. If it's not so much money, just do it." And I said, "I don't know. I have a Dave Matthews Band concert I'm supposed to go to." He's like, "You've been to over 30 of their concerts. You'll just go to another one." I was like, "You don't understand." And then he said, "David, just see how much it is." I look it up. It was $50 to extend for a month. Now, I didn't know about this thing called Hashgacha Pratit, which is divine providence, that God runs the world, and if he wants to, he'll make it accessible for you. But I am Jewish, and that free was for me. And so I was like, $50, I could do it. I got to stay. So I go. Every week we go somewhere different. We planned it out. Now, the third week, we're going to be in the biggest party city in the country, not Tel Aviv, but Eilat. I don't know if you ever heard of Eilat. It's at the southernmost tip of the land of Israel. It's like 120 degrees, but no humidity. So it's a really weird thing where you can be literally on fire, but you won't sweat. because it's evaporating as soon as you start. Though we rented out a house. Every night there, I'm just doing what I usually do. We're buying bottles. I'm drinking myself into oblivion. We're going into these clubs with these really old women. It was very sad. And you never did anything like that. Okay. Anyway, you would think how long are you going to do this for? How often are you going to keep doing, going up this well? There's nothing here. But something happened that on Thursday night, we went to this bar called Three Monkeys. I came out of this bar and I was like, this is pretty sad. You know what I mean? This never really ends up anywhere. I've been doing this for years. And I don't know, it was weird. I felt like at this point, this is kind of creepy. I don't know what I'm doing. I left there and we were by the ocean. There was a ride there. It was like a slingshot. And you go in the slingshot, it shoots you up really, really high, and then you sling back down. So when I was walking over there was a group of girls who were by the slingshot. So one of these girls was very attractive, and this is the unusual part, she was looking at me. So usually it's one of the two, either they're not and they're looking, or they are and they're not. But this is amazing because she was attractive and she was looking at me. So I was I stopped everything I was doing. I started walking over there. And these two guys were like, David, this is not going to go how you think it's going to go. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, this is not Penn State. And I was like, okay, so there's you notice that they have shirts to here? And I was like, yeah, so. He's like, you notice they have skirts down to here? And I was like, yeah, okay. And he's like, you see how hot it is? And I was like, yeah. He's like, don't you think it's weird that they have such long clothing on? And I was like, I don't know. And then he's like, they're religious. So I was like, okay. I didn't know what it was. You know what I mean? I already met these two guys. I'm like, okay, so they're like you. They're also in a cult, but she's really pretty, so whatever. I walk over. And what ended up happening was that she went on the ride. Back then, I was extremely sophisticated, so I was always planning things out because I didn't trust anybody. I didn't also believe in God. So if nobody's gonna take care of me, I gotta take care of myself. So she's going on this ride. So I'm like, okay, so I'll start talking to these girls who are her friends or her sisters. I don't know who they are. I'll get in with them, and then by the time she gets off, they'll introduce me to her, and then we're off. But I ended up speaking to her sister while she was on the ride, and I really connected with the sister. By the end of the conversation, I'm like, again, I'm very sophisticated, so I'm like, it's really late now. It's 12. These girls are probably gonna go to sleep. Tomorrow night's Friday night, party night, So I'll leave here now while it's good, before she really gets to know me. And then we'll hang out tomorrow. So I'm like, what are you guys doing tomorrow night? You guys want to get together? And they're like, tomorrow night's Shabbat. And I was like, what's that? And then again, I had the same experience the Tefillin kids. So she starts explaining to me this whole thing about there's family gets together and they eat and they drink. So I just thought it was a party. So I invited myself. They said, not a party. It's a religious thing. And then I was like, oh, okay. I was like, you guys have Facebook? And they said, no. I think back then they had MySpace. I don't know, whatever. I asked her a million things. She said no to everything. So again, this is weird because usually they're not interested and they're off. Or they're interested and they have an answer. Here again, we're in a paradox. She's saying no to me for everything, but she's smiling and she's not leaving. So I didn't know what to do, but I had this weird feeling she's not mine. I remember having this feeling inside of me she doesn't belong to me. I don't know why I had that feeling. I've thought a lot about it since, but just so you know a little bit about me, I'm very ambitious, and so when I think something, I want something, I don't give up until I have it. And in this case, this girl was probably the prettiest girl I'd ever met who actually was interested in me. And every part of me wanted this, but I felt like she's not mine. She doesn't belong to me. Something about the land of Israel was infiltrating my brain. And I said, it was nice to meet you, and I left. And I'm killing myself for hours because we're still up, we're drinking, it's like, we got to eat food just to like soak up the alcohol. So now it's like 2 or 3 a.m. But I'm like, how did I just like let that go? She was talking to me. She didn't leave. What was I doing? And I went into a pizza place. I walked in and I'm about to order the pizza. And all of a sudden that girl walks in with her sisters. So again, I don't know about this thing called hashgacha partit, but I did know how to make up a story about how I couldn't order the pizza so I could start talking to this girl again. So that's what I did. It was like a tourist place, so they spoke perfect English. And the guy's looking at me, and I was like, "Can you help me with like order the pizza over here?" She's like, "Yeah, sure." Anyway, we start talking again. Very end of the conversation, my friend said to me, "David, why don't you just ask for their number?" And I was like, "Dude, they said no to everything. They're not interested." He was like, "You have nothing to lose." So I said, "Can I have your guys' number?" And they're like, "Yeah!" And they gave it to me. And they're like, I was like, "You guys want to hang out after this Shabbat thing?" They're like, "We don't live here. We live with my father in Tel Aviv. My parents are divorced." And we planned that the last week that we were going to be in Israel was going to be in Tel Aviv, actually. So I was like, "This is amazing. We're also going to Tel Aviv." And we went. I went to their house. First time I ever had schnitzel. First time I ever had schnitzel and rice. Israeli salad. And here are these like 3 sisters, and I never met people like this, that they lived in such a small home with such like, I don't know, quaint things. And I never met happier people in my life. And it really like, it did something to me to see such simple, like innocent people who were so excited. Didn't seem like they had such a hole. Even though I was used to people with very big houses doing a lot of stuff to try to fill the hole. And then I think they asked me if I wanted to go bowling. I was like, sure. Bowling, it's a little weird. I haven't done this since I'm like 14, but okay, I like you, so let's go. We go bowling, and they're like, every time that they threw the thing, they would turn around and like start dancing. And I was like, dude, what are these people, what is going on with these girls? It's like, this is amazing. They're so happy, And then I remember that night, the girl that I liked said to me, my dad wants to meet you. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's waiting for you at home. I was like, it's late. No, he's probably sleeping. He goes, nope, wants to meet you. He's waiting for you. I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. We went back home. And here is this guy. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Taken.
Oh my God.
But he is like the Yemenite Israeli version of Liam Neeson. As soon as we get back to the house, here is this guy with a bottle of arak, chopping up watermelons from us. And as soon as we get home, he's about 6 foot. He's jacked. He's very dark skinned. And his 3 daughters just jump on him, like one on one shoulder, one on the other shoulder. And he's like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most masculine man I've ever seen in my life. He starts talking to me. I think he's yelling at me because I'd never met a Yemenite Israeli before. And I'm literally sitting there sweating as he's like screaming at me. And I said to this girl, I was like, I think your dad's mad at me. And he's like, why do you think that? And I was like, he's screaming at me. He goes, no, it's just how he talks. We end up watching like Twins, I think, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and like, whatever. He puts it on the big screen. He chops up these watermelons. We're taking shots of arak. I'm like, this is amazing. I was like, I don't know where I am, but this is unbelievable. I left there and I was like in love. I was in love with her. I was in love with him. I was in love with this. I don't know what this was. It felt like I was in a vortex of reality where you didn't need anything and you just felt great. Like I didn't know anything like that. They didn't ask me like what job I did. They didn't ask me how much money I had. They didn't ask me like what I wanted to do with my life professionally. I guess this is not the right place to say this. This is the place for young professionals. But like I was just like this was like I grew up with a lot of that, and I always kind of felt like an outsider. So I left there, and she just thought, okay, that was a nice, cute, secular Jewish guy who doesn't know anything about his Judaism. And I left like I fell in love with that girl. So I downloaded Skype to stay in touch with her. They don't have Skype anymore, right? I don't know,
Zoom.
Zoom, okay. So she also downloaded Skype to stay in touch with me. And I didn't tell her, again, how I felt because, again, I don't want to tell anybody how I feel because I don't want to get hurt. And I got hurt so many times. So at this point, I'm like macho. I'm wearing like wife beaters and basketball jerseys and side backwards hats. And I'm extremely tan and in good shape. And I don't want to tell anybody how I feel because I don't want to get hurt. So I just do my thing and then feel empty after. But at least I'm not getting hurt, right? But in this case, she's telling me about these dates that she's going on because I never told her how I felt about her. She just thought, oh, we're friends. You know what I mean? We'll stay in touch. Oh, I'm getting set up with this guy. I'm getting set up with this guy. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Have a good date. And I want to kill myself because like, this is terrible. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. But one day, I started graduate school at UCLA for social work. And before I got there, I was staying at my cousin's house. It was nighttime by me. It was daytime by me. It was nighttime by her. We were ending the Skype session, and I accidentally told her as we hung up, okay, Linny, have a good night, because she was going to sleep. I love you. And then I hung up the thing. Complete accident. I began dripping in sweat. I slugged myself into the shower. I spent the next half an hour convincing myself that either, one, she didn't hear me. Two, if she did, there was so little context that she would have just chalked it up to a mishearing of it, because there was nothing leading into that, not just in the conversation, like in life. There was nothing leading into that. Or I don't know, but by the time I got out of there, I was convinced we're good. We keep this facade going. Got myself ready, went back outside, looked at my phone, and then I get a text from her. Did you just tell me you loved me? I broke out in sweat again. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I did. But I didn't jump back in the shower. But I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, you're a secular atheist, Ashkenazi from America. You're into this girl who's a Yemenite, Israeli, Orthodox religious girl from the Middle East. What are the chances anything is going to happen? Like, what would even happen? What could happen from this? I'm in graduate school. I'm not stopping graduate school, right? And she's, I don't know. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe she really is different. And maybe I could really tell her how I feel. And I'm not going to get hurt. And then I said, on the side that I will get hurt, I should probably get hurt now. And that way I'll lick my wounds. I'll meet a cute non-Jewish girl here, and I'll forget this ever happened. And that's what I did. I texted her. I said, I did tell you that. And then she said back to me, David, this is not Penn State. I'm not from America. When people say they love somebody here, it means something. And I told her, I know, and I really meant it. I didn't hear back from her. I didn't realize that she actually just fell asleep. And the next 8 hours were the worst 8 hours of my life. Because I was like, oh my gosh, you're such a freaking loser. You see everything that you did, you tried to make yourself a certain way, and then you finally tell somebody how you feel. You're still that fifth grade kid that everyone's running away from, and nobody's ever gonna love you. And I literally felt like god awful for 8 hours. And then I see my phone, because at that point I actually took my phone, I turned it off and I threw it against the wall because I was so mad. I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody. And then finally I was like, okay, this was that second option, right? That I get hurt and then I got to go back on my phone. So I opened back the phone up, and then I get a text, I love you too. So yeah, I just told this for the girls to get into the story. Oh, well, I'll get you guys in a few minutes. Right? So now this is like I went from the worst moment of my life to the best moment of my life. But then there's an obvious question that anybody who grew up a little bit religious will ask me at this point, which is, one, why would she date a person who's not religious? Not because of superficial reasons, but because when you do believe in God, there's tremendous consequences of that. Not negative consequences, just there's byproducts of that. And one of them usually is that if you're going to get married to somebody, you're going to date somebody, what you're going to give your kids, like the whole thing. But God, Hashem knows, the Torah says that before you come down to this world, 40 days before you're conceived, you come down with your zivug, which means with your significant other. You guys are actually one, and you're split. I'm thinking of like that Lindsay Lohan movie right now. I don't know what it was. Freaky, I don't know where. Parent Trap. But you are actually one, and you're split, which is why you feel like something's missing, because something is missing, which is the other half of you. But it's not like the way that you grow up and think like, oh man, I hope one day something. No, the Torah says like literally where she grows up, her economic status, how her parents raise her, all of her experiences in life growing up, all of it is only to get you to eventually for her to meet you. And that when she does, she wants. And by the way, this girl, before I met her, she had just gone out with this guy who had really hurt her and cheated on her, said really nasty things to her. And her parents were already divorced, so she grew up with the mom saying all these things about her dad. So now she didn't trust men, nothing. And the only reason she went down there was because, like, I don't want to see a guy, I don't want to talk to a guy, nothing. When she visited me in America after this, something happened that I thought was the end of the relationship, but was actually when it got solidified, which is she got really sick. And she had to spend the entire week in the UCLA hospital. Now, for me, she's like an immigrant. She's alone. She doesn't have anybody. So I'm not leaving the hospital. But she knew that my apartment was right next to the UCLA hospital. So she's like, David, why don't you go home, take a shower, rest? I'm okay. I'll be here when you get here. And I was like, I'm not leaving you. And I didn't realize at the time, but what she was looking for now moving forward was someone that was loyal, that she could trust. And what I thought was like, oh my gosh, at that point I was like, this trip's got to go perfect. She's got to love LA. I'll show her there's religious Jews that live out here. Then she'll come out here. I had this whole thing planned out in my head. And instead, she has the worst week of her life. She's deathly sick at the UCLA hospital with like this crazy, thing that she caught. And really, she left there feeling like, oh, he's serious. I could be with this person. She went home. Now, as time went on, she realized I wasn't just secular, I was actually anti. And then we had real conversations, like, and I had all these philosophical questions, all these difficulties, all these challenges. And she is a very smart, but very simple Sephardi Israeli Jewish woman who never thought about these things and doesn't care about these things. And it doesn't make a dent, And I remember like speaking them out to her and her saying to me, like, I don't need scientific proof for like the existence of God. She's like, I know God exists. It's like, it's obvious to me, just like I'm talking to you. So for me, that was like crazy even hearing that. And I saw she felt bad for me, that like I needed this like very superficial information to realize that there was someone who created reality and that like I matter and that I'm like, someone made me. But then she told me, she's like, David, there's Orthodox rabbis who have like answers to these questions, right? And I was like, what? And then she's like, yeah, just find any Orthodox rabbi. They answer these questions all the time. I told my dad, like, I'm going to visit one of these guys. And then my dad's like, don't let them convert you. And then I met him. And then no, I'm just kidding. He answered all my questions. And I was like, no, it's not another religion. It's like they just keep it. It's not a conversion. Still don't understand. But anyway, I ended up speaking to this rabbi there who had a lot of answers for a lot of my questions, but he had a lot of questions I didn't have a lot of answers for. And that was the first time in my life, one, I felt like intellectually stimulated in a good way about spirituality, about God, about Judaism, whatever. On the other hand, I also felt intellectually challenged, which was unusual for me at the time. I was very intrigued. So I started following this guy, and he had one of these houses, had people over for Shabbos. I had my first Shabbos. again, I kind of felt like at the Shabbos table, I'm like, oh, this is really a cult. You know, they don't use technology and like, you know, but on the other hand, like we're all sitting around at a table like this and we were having real conversations, like about real things. And I loved it. I loved like every part of it. And I felt again like I was home, even though I'd never been here. But it's a cult, so I'm not like gonna move any. And I came there and I was spewing all my atheistic beliefs. And thank God the rabbi was really nice and he let me come and keep doing this. I did this for about a year. He even came up to me and he told me, he's like, David, listen, I'll tell you, I have a lot of respect for you. Not that I agree with anything that you think, I don't. But I never met somebody who was so stubborn in their belief that they kept coming and hearing what we're saying and didn't move 1 inch. And you, I really respect the fact that you don't move from your beliefs. I didn't realize at the time, again, Rabbi Nachman,
Who's that?
this is a great spiritual master who lived, he was born in 1772. He passed away in 1810. He was born in a city called Mezhibush in Ukraine. His great-grandfather was the creator of the revival of Judaism called Hasidus. He was born in that house, grew up in that house, and he was a very unique person. One of the most unique people who ever lived. I'm not even just talking religious, I'm talking about just, I don't think there's ever been a person who's ever lived that's like this person. The way he spoke, what he said, how he acted, he was really unique. As time would go on, he would become like the main source of inspiration for me, the main source of connection for me. At this point, he's like my Dave Matthews. So just for context, like, you know, now I'm traveling around the world to see him, you know, and his students and things like this. So we'll get more to Rabbi Nachman in a second. But right. Yeah, so what ended up happening is like this. I was in my UCLA apartment, and I was in my UCLA apartment, and I heard this loud sound that was coming out of the apartment. And I thought that it was a frat party next door, because there was a frat house next to my graduate school building. So I look outside, but it's dark, which means nobody's there. I was like, that's weird. Maybe it's coming in the apartment building. So I'm looking around in the apartment building for a party that's going on just to hear where the sound's coming from. But I don't see where it's coming from there either. So it's not coming from outside and it's not coming from inside, and the sound is getting louder. So now I'm really nervous because I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's like one of two things that's happening. Either I'm having like an acid flashback from the one time that I did acid in Atlantic City, or I'm having a nervous breakdown. And I don't know which one it is, but both of them are bad. I got down on the floor, I put a blanket on my head, and I said over and over again for about 10 minutes, please stop, please stop, please stop. It was my first prayer I ever made in my life. It's called Ibodadut. It's secluded meditation. But the sound kept getting louder and louder and louder. And I was really, really scared. And then in one moment, just stopped. Probably a few months later, I didn't tell my girlfriend about it because, again, I didn't want to think I was crazy. But she showed me a YouTube video of a sound that was being heard all around the world, but nobody knew where it was coming from. And when I heard the sound, I started to get the chills because I recognized the sound from then. And I said, Linny, what's that sound? She goes, David, you know that sound? And I'm like, no, I don't. What's the sound? She goes, David, everyone knows that sound. And now I'm getting like really, I'm like, what is the sound? She goes, it's a shofar blast. I look up on like Chabad.org, what's the shofar blast? Apparently, there's going to come a time where this person's going to come called Mashiach, and he's going to be a great teacher who's going to lift the collective consciousness of humanity. And when he comes, there's going to be this shofar that's blown all around the world, and everyone who hears it is going to want to return back to their source. And then I was like, wow, interesting. Because right after that moment, I then told my girlfriend, I'm going to start keeping Shabbat. Just like that. I didn't know what it was, but I'm like, I'm going to start keeping Shabbat. Right away, and I did. I think about a few weeks later, I started keeping kosher. Obviously, when I told her, she was shocked. It was almost like the "I love you." There was no context. Nothing went into it. She was, Um, but um, but after that journey started, right? After that journey started, so I was still looking for my thing. I felt like this was true. I felt in some ways it spoke to why I struggled my whole life, what was missing in my life, um, why I felt like a stranger in a strange land. That my story is actually a very old story. It's the story of Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and I'm not alone. There was this guy named David who, somewhere down the line I was named after, who wrote a book talking about all of his mental health struggles and suffering, and um, someone put it on pen to paper. So, but I was still looking for my thing, what I really connected to, and then eventually I found this book. This book was called Likutei Moharan. It's written by this person called Rabbi Nachman. I read this book, and again, I had this feeling when I opened it and read it. I feel like I'm home, even though I'd never been here. And from that moment, I've never been the same. I've been learning that book day and night. It's been over 10 years. One of the things that he speaks about, which is, he says, is the number one thing that a person can do in their life to find clarity, to find inner peace, to find joy, to find connection, to make the reality of God not something which is superficial or religious or external, but something really, really profound, deep, and felt, is this type of secluded meditation called Hitbodedut. So Hitbodedut comes from the word boded, which means to be alone. In fact, during COVID, when everybody had to go into, what is it called? Yeah. So that word, isolation, in Israel, they called it bidud, which was imposed isolation from the government. Rabbi Nachman was encouraging you for self-imposed isolation, where you go alone, and he says you speak to God as if you're talking to your best friend. And you talk to him about everything in your life. Everything. In your own words, in your own language, and do it for an hour a day. Now, there was no way I was doing it for an hour, and doing it for 30 seconds was almost impossible because I grew up not believing in God. So now I'm speaking to like an invisible reality. The thought of doing this was like, how much can I really do this? But I ended up going through a very difficult period in my life where I had my worst depressive episode ever. It lasted actually 3 years. And I tried every psychiatrist, every therapist. I even tried experimental stuff like TMS, which is transmagnetic stimulation. Nothing helped me. And at that point, I had 2 little babies. Oh, I got married to that girl. Yeah, thank God. And I had 2 little children at home. Just so you know, if you guys have never experienced depression before, like at least when you're having fun, how time goes faster, and when you like maybe how you feel right now and you just want to get out of here, so time goes really slow, right? So when you're depressed, imagine it on like, instead of like 4x on your YouTube or whatever, it's like negative 20x. Every day felt like a week, every week felt like a month. The idea of getting up again and doing this again tomorrow was, and as you have more responsibilities, and let's say you're married or you have kids, it's different than just struggling alone. There's no, if I don't figure it out tomorrow, it's okay. I have time to figure this out. When people are relying on you, it's much more pressure, and it's really harder to get out of it. And I was really, first of all, I was really struggling, but one, I was really resentful towards God because I had changed my entire life to connect to him. And yet, I've never struggled more in my life. Now, because I was so desperate, I ended up doing this crazy thing called ECT. You might have seen it in a Jack Nicholson movie from the 70s. It's called electroconvulsive therapy. Why would you do something like that? Yes, that's right. Why would you end up doing something like that? Because there's an 80% success rate for treatment-resistant depression, which means if you've been depressed your entire life and nothing has helped you, you have an 80% chance of getting better by doing this. Now, why wouldn't you do it then? Because one, you're getting electric shocked. Two, it's extremely dangerous. Three, you're likely to lose years of memory. But at this point, I was very desperate, and I thought David alive without memory is better than David not here anymore with good memory. And so I made a very difficult decision to try it. I did lose years of memory. And let's say 80%. So that means 5 people go in a room, 4 of them are going to get better. So I was the one that did it. And at that point, I was really scared about myself, what I'm going to do to myself, because I just didn't want to be here anymore. And so I actually, because I went to social work school, so I knew what's a place that I could be safe. I checked myself into a hospital. And I'm like, at least here, the pressure will be off and I could take whatever time I need to get better and figure things out. It was at that place that a lot of things that Rabbi Nachman had said that for me at that point were theoretically true, I saw were actually true in terms of what actually makes people happy, what actually causes sadness, what makes people anxious, things of this nature, which I read and I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I wasn't sure it was true. There I realized it was true because we all had something in common. Few things in common, which we could talk afterwards about it, but it was there that I made a decision that this Hipodadut thing, I wasn't going to try and do this, meaning I wasn't going to do 30 seconds or a minute of it. If God is real, that means that I'm here because he wants me to be here. Why in the world would he want me to be here going through all of this? The only reason that I could possibly imagine is to get much closer to him than I am right now. How would I do such a thing? Well, this person who's the only person who really gives me hope, this Rabbi Nachman figure and his teachings, is telling me that the number one thing that you could possibly do to find closeness to God, no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through in your life, is to talk to God for at least an hour a day. Now, all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, fine. I don't have answers for myself. Nothing has helped me. And I don't want to just survive anymore. I need my life to change, and I can't do it. So if you're real, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to fix my mental health. You're going to have to fix my relationship with my wife. You're going to have to make me a good father. You're going to have to make me present. You're going to have to make me be able to work at a job and keep the job. All of these things. Because I can't do it. Not because I don't want to do it, not because I don't try, not because I'm not a good person. I try more than anybody that I know, harder than anybody that I know. I'm a decent person, I care about people. So none of that was the reason. But I literally see that I can't do it because I'm here. So I'm going to start telling you everything. Everything. My dreams, my hopes, my failures, my insecurities. I'm going to say it all. And then I'm going to then wait for you to do it. I'm not going to do anything anymore. And if you help me, I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to help your kids do the same. And he answered, and my whole life turned around. I found purpose. I found meaning. The difficulties that I went through in my life actually became the driving force for everything that I do. I'm here now in Chicago, not because, I love Josh. I just met him, but I don't know him that well. But Josh has had similar experiences with this Rabbi Nachman figure in his own personal life. And he reached out to me and he said, do you want to come to Chicago? Now, doesn't make sense for me to make that flight with now 5 kids. The only time that I actually have with my family not working to do something like this. But I made a promise. And so every day since that time, one, I have talked to God for at least an hour a day. So it's been over 10 years now. It's totally changed my life. And Hashem has totally changed mine. God for me is not like a theoretical reality. I heard there's God or someone told me there's God. I know there's God. And I know that he cares about me. But I only know that because I gave him space in my life to be able to show me. Right? So, and then 2, I do whatever I can to help Hashem's kids because he loves you guys more than anything. And even though you may feel like he abandoned you, or maybe you're not sure if he's real, or you don't know how it fits into your life, if you want to give anybody a chance in any relationship, you have to be able to give them space to enter in. You know, if you're dating somebody and you're never really being honest with them, then you can never really ascertain who this person is and how they can relate to you, because you never gave them the real you. You know, when I was in college, if I'm this tan, jacked, you know, fake Italian, and I'm getting with all these trashy non-Jewish girls, so, and then they like me for that, but then when I see that I actually say the things that I care about, they're like, what? That's weird. And then I'm resentful towards them. Well, why am I resentful towards them? Because I'm not really being me. God is not a person. He's truth. So if you want to experience the truth, you have to be truthful. And it's scary. It's scary to be truthful when you don't know if this thing is real, and you don't know if he cares, and you probably have a lot of tainas, complaints against him for whatever you've been through in your life. All of these things, you're validated. You have every reason to feel like you feel. Still, and because of, ask the person who had you go through those things, why? Don't just ask a rabbi why God does these things. Ask God why he does these things. And ask him, what do you want from this? Because if you're good, then this has to become good. And I can't possibly see how this is going to become good. But if you're real and you're good, then you can make this good. And that would do a lot for me and you. Give him a shot. Because until you do that, you can't say, yes, he exists. No, he doesn't exist. Yes, he's good. No, he's not good. Yes, he loves me. Because you don't know. And with that, I would say thank you for letting me come here, talk to you. It means a lot to me. There's not, besides my clothes, there's not much different between me and you, besides a few years. If anybody here wants to talk to me after this, I'd be happy to speak to anybody about anything. And thank you so much. And I highly